All right, we're live. I got a very special guest today. I'm excited to start to break bread with him a little bit. This is going to be an awesome time. I'm really excited to get into this. We got the one and only Mickey Schuch, carry trainer. What's going on, brother?
I am doing well. Sure, I am doing well. Schuch, like all shook up, is the correct pronunciation of my name.
Schuch.
Bartolo.
I know. It's Italian.
Bartolo.
It's fragile. That's Italian.
Fragile. Yeah, exactly.
So listen, man. This is a real honor and a pleasure. Everybody speaks so highly of you. You're probably one of the most respected guys out there in the game.
Shit.
Listen, write it down.
Hey, man,
I'm telling you.
You haven't even bought me dinner yet, and now you're trying to get in my pants right out of the gate.
Right out the gate. So Mickey, listen, let's dive right in. I want to know, how did you establish yourself as an instructor, and what led you down this path? Because everybody knows it's a miserable, thankless path.
It can be, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's always an honor when somebody asks me to join them. You said break bread. I like that term. That is what this is. Long and the short of it is, I enjoy passing on information. That does not necessarily make somebody an instructor, but I've got a kind of a storied past. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I'm not a soldier or a military guy. And I think there's some big misconceptions about that.
Sure, yeah, I want you to get into that. Yep.
I don't ever claim such things, but I think in this business, being a police officer doesn't make somebody a firearms instructor, just as driving a car doesn't make somebody a race car driving instructor, or I cook dinner. It doesn't make me a chef or somebody that can teach cooking. So
right.
I spent a lot of time in my life around the shooting sports. I worked with the Department of Natural Resources as a hunter safety instructor. That was probably my first, I would say, exposure to topics like this in firearm safety and things of that nature. And I actually took on the role as the president of an organization that lobbied and educated for gun rights, our state of Illinois, much like some East Coast states, very draconian gun laws. We were the last state in the nation to pass a law that allowed for legal concealed carry. And I'm very proud of the time that we've worked on that, and we're still continuing to. And what had happened was, as this law passed, all of a sudden, everybody that owned a pistol thought, I'm going to make some money and teach people to shoot. And we had been doing some stuff in that sector, but it exploded. And so we began teaching then, and it kind of branched out. That was 7-8 years ago. And here we are today. And there's some more bits and pieces, but I don't find it that interesting.
Well, I know. I think what you touched on is the fascinating part is the stigma that comes with guys who get out there, instruct, have success, but they weren't door kickers or special forces or whatever, what have you. And I've talked about this for a million years. My story, it's been discussed, debated, talked about on this show a million times. I graduated the police academy. I was never anything more than a reserve or part-time guy at any point in my life. I was never anything exciting. I worked a fair or two in my life. I've never done anything great. I did graduate an academy. That's a fact. I graduated Melita 8 in Massachusetts. And, at the end of the day, I'm just one of those guys that, believes, everybody can get out there and do their thing. I was never an instructor. I think that was a little bit of a misconception around the industry, was that I was an instructor. I came from the finance world. And when I had the opportunity to get into the gun world 10 years ago or so, it was a byproduct of just helping companies as social media started to rise and become a thing. And I started my consulting company, and it led to me being a CEO and doing other things around the industry. And I just was fortunate that I got in at the ground level and and was kind of almost like a technical advisor in many ways with a lot of brands and worked closely with them. And I was just a fantastic networker. I never sat back, like when people would say, what's your background? I'd say, I don't know, the wall, the white wall behind me. I don't know what that grants you or what that gets you other than cardinal knowledge. And this is something Tony has brought up many times. Like, yeah, I mean, of course it's going to give you, tactics and certain things. I don't ever get on a range or claim to know those things above anybody, above, any instructor I've ever had through the years. Even when I worked with Rob Pincus, I never once was someone that was like, I know more than this guy. And I've been fortunate to train with a lot of people and have a lot of training, whether it was doing jiu-jitsu or whether it was on the ranges. There's a lot of stuff I don't post or talk about, but the background thing is very fascinating.
Well, I everything you just said, I agree with. I also won't come out and say, woe is me. I'm happy that people will pay me because I'm nobody. I kind of joke around. If the amount of time that I have been a student is more than most people spend going to college to get degrees. So if somebody can go to school for 4 or 6 or 8 years and get a job, doing whatever the thing is they went to school for, somebody else can certainly be a pupil in another field. For example, I'm a carpenter by trade. I don't do the trade anymore, but you go through 4 or 5 years of apprenticeship and learning on the job, so to speak, and now you are considered a journeyman in some trades after you put that time in. And that's really where I learned. I was fortunate to have mentors that are the most respected people in the business. Some of them are close personal friends, and some of them are not so high profile. It's not because they're not known, but they don't have social media following. Some of these people are professional shooters. Some of them are professional soldiers, and some of these people they just have no need to. Guys like you and me, we use social media because it's how we generate business. When there's guys like Super Dave Harrington, for example. Dave's got like a Facebook page, and I think he just started something on Instagram. You either know Dave and know how to find him, or you shouldn't find him, because if you don't know him and don't know how to find him, you probably don't want to be on his range. And that's, like the way Super Dave Harrington is. So there's guys like that you spend enough time with them, and you're learning their collective experiences as well. Not that I would take those experiences and say, because this guy I trained with did something, it means I can do the same.
Right.
Our deal is we try to make things accessible, consumable. There is no mysteries. There's nobody out there that's got the market on some secret knowledge. I had a long talk today with a friend of mine, DR Middlebrooks, a name that not a lot of young people know, but he's the guy that made us, or really brought to the shooting world so much of what we think is the norm. Shooting with your thumbs forward, a high straight arm on a carbine. This guy was a national level shooter back in the 80s and 90s, and very well respected in a lot of circles, but he never was like a social media guy. And so people don't know who he is. Now he's in his 60s, but that doesn't negate anything that he did. And where I'm going with that is there's nobody that's got some secret sauce. There's instructors that want you to think, if I just go with John, man, I'm going to get the secret sauce. No, you're not. I wish you had some secret sauce. I'd pay you.
Oh, you're so right, and it's crazy and refreshing to hear. And I agree with everything you just put out there. It's understanding that, everybody starts out the same, right? You go and you're getting instruction. So whether you go to an academy and you pass a police qualification, or you go to boot camp and you pass a qualification, at the end of the day, you're starting out with a baseline and you're developing a skill set. And then I try to explain to people all the time, it's just rounds down range. People come to me all the time. They're like, how do I get good at shooting? They're like, hire a shooting instructor. And they're like, well, what about you? Don't you know about those things? I'm like, I'm not an instructor. I don't know. I have pieces of paper that say I am, but I'm like, I've never gotten into it because I don't have the patience. And I've said that to some of my best of friends. It's to me, teaching and having the ability to teach requires a certain skill set. It's a skill set. If you know me, I don't have it. I don't profess to have it. I don't possess that skill. And I think the guys who build out a business and have that skill set to spend time on the range and start from zero with somebody, I give them all the credit in the world. I might make a great AP teacher, and show people some stuff, but having the patience to start from baseline to all the way is a true skill. And I think a lot of guys just feel like, I did this, so I'm entitled to that. And I think that's the mindset that you've had for a long time in the gun business. I have seen it shifting, and I have seen it slowly turning, because I brought up the example one time, in talking to mutual friends, that, I said, would you take any pro shooter, any top 50 guy that doesn't have a military or law enforcement background? Do you want to get in a gunfight with them? Probably not. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Is that something like, and it just it's a stupid question, but it's an honest one, right? I mean, come on. I mean, but
I've got a really good friend that's a top 10 dude. And I've had guys say to me, well, he's not a tactical guy. And he'll tell you he's not. He's a top 10 production pistol shooter, and amazing dude. His name's Les Kismartoni, Les Pepperoni, but Les, I've had guys kind of break bad on him. I say, okay, man, I'll put you guys in an empty building and we'll just let you loose on each other. Like, you're willing to risk your skills against a guy that can shoot headshots at 50 yards, like in 3 seconds from the holster?
Yeah. And I'll give the best example, okay, to everybody out there. And you can save the jokes for later. But you take somebody like Taron, right? Completely out of shape. Never served a day in his life, never did law enforcement. Do you want to get in a gunfight with the guy? Have you seen him shoot from the hip? I mean, come on.
No, sir.
So, it's one of those things, like, I wouldn't want to. He looks pretty efficient in his movements because he ain't moving that far. So, it's one of those things that's followed this business around for a really long time. Sean Burrows is another good friend of mine that, Sean has a really good explanation for it. He's like, it just blows my mind. And he's run into some people with some very decorated backgrounds, if you will. And he's like, I don't have the time for it. But it's one of those stigmas of the business. And I think that, it goes in waves. You and I have been around long enough. We've seen the cycles of the business at the shows and whatnot, where people cycle in and then they cycle out, and then the long-term players stick around. I mean, I think we're both fair in saying that.
I agree. There are some heavy caveats to that, though. I've got friends like Paul Sharp, who is one of the founders of ShivWorks.
Yeah,
he's
SBG.
an SBG guy. Yeah, my buddy Z Durham, another BJJ black belt and a Green Beret. And when you start to have guys, myself would be a perfect example. So I've taken courses on room clearing or dynamic room entry or things of that nature. Could I pass on some information in a meaningful way? Yes. Would a guy like Z Durham, who is a specialist with one of the most elite units that the U.S. Army has and spent years as an expert in room clearing and CQB and the like, let's go to Z for that, because he's got real relevant knowledge. And it's disingenuous when guys go out and try to pass stuff on like that. And now I actually just filmed a video today talking about a topic similar to that. While you don't have to or have had to have been a Congressional Medal of Honor winner to teach gun skills, when you start to teach certain things that are outside of one's wheelhouse or realm, that's where it's a problem. And there's dudes doing that now with combatives because they took a class where somebody taught them how to punch a target and draw, but they're not really teaching people proper striking technique or mindset or body movement or positioning. And what it's disingenuous. The student thinks that they're getting some knowledge, and in reality, most of my friends or your friends would twist those people's arms off and shove their gun up their ass before they ever got a chance to do anything. So it's kind of like those bullshit weekend courses where your girlfriend goes and learns self-defense. I'm doing air quotes over here, for like a weekend. That's bullshit. You don't learn how to fly an airplane in 4 hours. You don't learn how to protect yourself in 4 hours. Like, it's a lifelong journey to do that. And so I think that is a problem when guys understand some concepts, but they don't have the totality of something. And that's really like a big problem in a lot of areas of society and education. But when we're talking about things where life and death are at play and at stake, it's amazing that there's not more people shot in training classes from what I have seen, but I don't want to bash on anybody.
No, Mickey, you're 100% right. It's funny. I'm like the king of having useless pieces of paper. I got them all. And, I graduated Gracie GST. Does that mean I'm going to go to like a Paul Sharp or a Chad Lyman or even a Ruben BJJ and be like, hey, let me show you a thing or two. Oh, Ruben actually graduated GST with me, so that's a bad example. Hey, let me show you, a few moves in jiu-jitsu that can be used on the street. Like, of course, you know what I mean? It's comical, but there are guys who get mad at me when I say stuff like that because they got the piece of paper and they're like the weekend warrior walking around in the whole Gracie costume because they took a week-long class 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it's pretty, and, I come from an SBG lineage. I went from SBG to 10th Planet in Vegas. So I sit down with people and I don't publicize that a lot. And I've had people sit with me and talk to me about combatives and talk to me about that stuff, and I just sit there and I'm like, really? Seriously? Like, we're gonna go down this road? I've had some crazy stuff, and Tony could tell you a few guys, we've had some crazy stuff said to us. It's just, I look at these people and I'm like, do you understand that even as a guy who spent the better part of his career as a marketing director and an executive in the firearms business, I've trained with a lot of people. A lot. And I've been around and met and talked with a lot of people. And you can tell after you have a conversation with me what will fly out of my mouth and what won't. And the things I hear and the stuff I see sometimes that comes out of people's mouths, I'm like, wow. I just shake my head at like some of the things, and I'm just like, and that's why a lot of the companies always had a trust in me in a sense, because I'm one of the few people that's threaded that. Go and look at all your marketing directors and your decision makers on who gets sponsored and who doesn't. And you tell me how many of those guys have done the things that I've done or trained with the people I've trained with. They haven't. I'll say it to them. They know they haven't. I have. So I've been fortunate in that sense to kind of see through the veil a little bit, peek behind the curtain, and I can tell, I can see it. And there's so many folks out there that don't understand what the other guy's trying to do, so then they just want to put them down, or they just want to have something to say, or whatever it is. And sure. I sit back and I'm just like, I'm more than prepared to have a logical conversation about whatever it is you're doing, trying to do, or whatever you think you know. But I've seen every phase of this business and lived through it. And I just, it's an interesting, the defense industry is a very, very interesting place. And what you have, I say it all the time, is a lot of guys who weren't hugged enough as kids.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that in a lot of ways. I mean, there's guys that have the bully syndrome, the quintessential, and no, I hope nobody gets pissed off, but the guy that you say, geez, that cop must have been the kid that got picked on in school, now he's throwing his weight around. But then on the flip side, you've got the dude that is the been there, done that, carried the flag for the United States into combat with the highest echelons of service, and the dude's got some stuff that is in his background that I don't mean like adult background, but stuff from child rearing years that it left him not whole. And there's people like that everywhere, but then those people go on and they become business people after they leave the service. Mm-hmm.
There was
I don't mean that in a negative way towards anybody, but
there was an interesting piece that came out not long ago. An instructor got out there and I'm not going to name his name. I won't do that. But he got out there and he basically said, oh yeah, there's all these special operations guys. They're going to come home and they're going to put everybody out of business and blah, 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 blah. And, Tony called me. He said he had seen it, Real World Tactical. And he said, he said, did you see that piece? I said, yeah. And we were just talking about it. And I was like, it's interesting. People just forget everything that goes into it. Like, there's a lot of people that have a lot to say about instructors or folks out there, whether it's Rob Pincus or whether it's maybe you, maybe whoever, but they dismiss everything that goes into what you just brought up, running a business and actually building a business. Like I look at like John Lovell, and when I look at John Lovell, and John and I are friends, I don't see somebody that's a former Army Ranger and he's this and that. I see a great businessman. And when I talk to John, and John will tell you this, we've done podcasts together, we've chatted, I consider him a friend. He'll say, everything we talk about is business related. How successful he is at this. And I applaud so many of his victories and his successes. But I feel, and I'll always feel, Mickey, that we're in a business where people say, you have what I want. That's mine. You took it from me, not you earned it, not the time that goes into it. Like I look at you, successful business. I love the stuff you put out. I love what you preach. And
thank you.
And I see success, right? I see a guy who's built a business, whether it's a side hustle or a full-time thing. And I'm like, bravo. Like I love this guy. Good on him. And we talked about somebody before the show started. I'm not going to say his name. He's not here to defend himself, but you take people that just have something negative. Well, why are you negative on that person? What's the reason? Well, I just don't like them. Like, what? Like, the minute that stuff happens to me, you're a bridge burner. I can't have anything to do with you. And that's what bothers me.
I'm kind of the same. I'm the same way.
I just can't have it. I just can't be around those type of people, and I can't have those
waste
people
of life
in my circle. It's because if you can't, okay, listen, there's two things. Mickey, you've been around. I know you're the type of guy you are in many ways. You hang around with Paul Schuch. You hang around with these people. I know the type of guy you are.
What would you say if I told you I'm wearing ladies' panties right now?
I'd say you.
Would you have guessed? Would you have guessed that?
I'd say you were doing it for the comfort of the speed. But my thing is, you're the type of guy, a lot like me, where if something bothers you, you're gonna say it, and you're gonna have a reason. And short of you stealing my money or my girl, there's really no reason to hate anybody.
Yeah.
That's just how I function in life. Like, oh, you screwed my chick. Okay, we got a problem here. Okay, you stole my wallet. We got a problem here. Beyond that, like, the rest is just bullshit, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's not a lot that I despise, but dishonor is one of them. We had an issue come up this past year in our circle where one person completely did something dishonorable to another. And it's not like, he was late to a party or something. It was lawsuit kind of level
money,
stuff.
Money. Ends up costing money.
And it was a big deal. And there was a multiple opportunities for the situation to get rectified. And it wasn't even money to fix it. It was almost like that part could have been forgiven if it was, hey man, I effed up. Can you forgive me? I don't know what the hell I did, but instead it was, let's take the low road and dig our heels in and pretend like we can argue why we're right. Well, now you've just told me and a bunch of other people that not only are you not on our level, not because we're elevated, but I don't hang out with dirtbags that steal from my friends. And I also, on the same token, people that will defend that kind of behavior, you're no use to me either, because why do I want to hang out with people that defend thieves? So, and I've done dishonorable shit in my life, so I don't say that from pious, standpoint, like I've never done wrong. I mean, I've been the shittiest of the shitty. So but to your point, once you've kind of illustrated that to me, if you don't make it right or try to, we don't really have a lot in common anymore. I don't want to drink beer with you. I don't want to talk with you because what do you, either I have to always watch you or it's all fake. And my life's too short for that.
Yeah, no, you're preaching the choir, man. I absolutely agree with everything you're spitting, and it's refreshing to hear sometimes because we're in a business. You go to SHOT Show, and I always call SHOT Show. You go to the circus, you see the clowns, you see the people, and you bounce around. Like I've had through my years in the business, and it's been about 10 years hard in the business. I've seen it all. And I've seen people come around and come and go. And it's funny to me because I've heard everything. I always pick on myself. I've heard everything about myself. I've heard, I saw him at a party and he was hammered, and people like, John doesn't even drink, like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just, it's a funny business like that. And I don't think it'll lose that anytime soon, but you do have to elevate in some ways. And who you put in your circle really has changed a ton for me personally, because it just, over the years of just being in this business, when I see guys, I try to give as much gratitude, but the minute you start burning bridges and the minute you become what I call, and I was talking about this with Ray Cashcare not long ago, the minute you start becoming a bridge burner and a guy who just doesn't care and he'll say whatever, he'll do whatever. This story, I'll tell you quick, and the people will remain nameless in it. I recently, a friend of mine called me and he said, "You're not going to believe this." I said, "What?" Very notable instructor, another very notable instructor. He said, "So-and-so just sent a DM to someone talking shit about me on a high level of shit, and sent it." And he took a screenshot of it and he called me and he was like, it was so bad. The person picked up the phone and called him and asked him if his personal life was all right, without getting into the topic and what it was. And he was like, "Yeah, why? I'm fine." And he was like, "What?" And he goes, "Well, this person said," people are fucking crazy and they're cutthroat and they do things that I'm shocked that grown people do this type of stuff. And it's all because I feel,
of course, that's not indicative just of the firearms business.
But I think it's rampant in our business because I feel like at the bottom levels, the way the companies treat it, and I blame the companies in some ways, it's like throwing food from the trough and the pigs kind of scramble to get a good apple. It's because for a while, and this about this business, it was, "We'll give you a muzzle break and we own you," kind of thing. And everybody's,
well, I must, let me just make one point to that. The one thing I would say is no man owns me. And if I choose to be owned for a muzzle break or a trigger or whatever, I am the whore that is selling myself. I'm the guy, or you're the guy or the gal, whoever it is, that says, "Okay, for this chattel, this thing, this widget, I will be your indentured servant." Well, fuck that. No, then that's anything. You people that hate their job, I always say to people, do they have some kind of contract with you where you can't leave? Did you promise your mom on her deathbed you'd stay there? What's the deal? I don't know. That's just my take. I've got this whole self-responsibility, American liberty thing kind of.
No, but I think I think you're right, but not a lot of people have that. So you're in rare air, and that's an exceptional policy statement to have for yourself. Not everybody has that, and people get caught in these pseudo relationships and these partnerships in these scenarios, and they never convert it. The hardest thing people have to do in life is convert something they love and monetize it. That's the hardest thing in the world to do. If you find something you love, and I don't care if it's walking dogs, you and I have come across probably a gazillion people in the world that have said, the craziest shit that they love to do, right? And being a firearms instructor is probably pretty up there, right? People would be like, "Oh, okay." But if you find a way to monetize it and you find a way to make a living off of it, that's the dream. Really, because it's a lifestyle choice. And if you can monetize something that you can do well into your later years, then you're really living the dream. You're essentially annuitizing it at that point. And I look at guys in the business that I look up to in terms of what they've built and what they do. And I brought up John Lovell earlier. He's an easy one. And I look at the media conglomerate.
John's awesome, by the way. I didn't say that earlier, but I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. You look at what he's built and what he's building, and it's brick by brick, step by step. I look at guys even Rob Pincus. I look at guys like you. I look at guys you can't. Despite of course Rob's mouth and everything else, but you have to love. Rob, I love you, but you know what I mean. He'll come on. I'll get him on the show, but he can defend himself. But I look at what they've built and the businesses they've built, and you have to, tip your hat. And I love everybody. There's a lot I love about a lot of the guys in the business, but there is that pettiness that will always exist.
There's an interesting book I read years ago. I've been self-employed over 20 years. There's a book I read years ago. It was written in the 80s, so before the computer and internet really took over for businesses. And it was self-help book, basically for tradesmen, how to operate your trade-related business. And there was a topic, one of the early chapters, and the premise was, just because you're an excellent plumber doesn't make you an excellent plumbing business owner, or an excellent painter doesn't make you an excellent painting business owner. And the author coined the term an entrepreneurial seizure. And like years ago, there's a pretty prestigious college here in Chicago called Kellogg. It's attached to Northwestern. It's Kellogg School of Business Management, which I, as a kid that barely graduated high school, got to go work at Kellogg and help these kids in this entrepreneur program as part of the business school. It was pretty cool. And I realized early on, holy crap, these kids are fucked. They are paying six figures for this business experience for something that you don't learn at college. And they're like learning to be entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, you don't go take a 2-year college to learn that. You sort it out, right? And I think the point I'm driving at is, guys, they get good at shooting or good at soldiering or being a law enforcement officer or even something that's training related. You might be a fine instructor, but instructing is not the same as building a brand, selling, doing bookkeeping, marketing, social media, networking, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where a lot of people don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with customers. I just want to teach. Well, then go work at a range or go work for a police department, running their training program or whatever it might be. I'm off it.
No, you're on a great point, and it makes a ton of sense. Now, for you, you've built this business, and you're in a tough area to do it. How have the struggles been being located where you are and getting to where you've gotten?
That's a good question. I must add, I would not be in this business if not for great friends and mentors. Nobody put me in business. Nobody helped me start a business, but I have had and have great men who mentored me and helped me by holding me accountable. So that I think is first and foremost. Any measure of success I have, and there's so many guys that do so much more than we do, it would be impossible without those groups of guys. Guys like Paul Sharp, I just mentioned, my buddy Z, Dave Harrington, and others. There's just so many awesome dudes out there that are pillars in this business. Yeah. So challenges are the same in any business, right? Who's your target market? How do you acquire customers? What is it you're selling them? How are you getting that product to them? How are you collecting funds? All of those things. And for me, I think I'm not some business guru, but I've been self-employed my whole adult life, basically. So the mechanisms of business are not a concept to me that need a lot of work, but figuring out how to apply business to this space. I don't want to say I pioneered anything, but there's a lot of stuff that we did with social media, and YouTube, namely, that a lot of guys weren't doing. They were putting shit to DVD or VHS, and we started making stuff accessible. So the challenge is, even though there's a lot of people that are carrying firearms, training with firearms, there's a finite amount of people that spend money on training. And even fewer of those spend money on training at the level that we provide it, meaning there's a lot of $50 classes for a couple hours at a local range, not where somebody's dropping $500 to a couple $1,000 for an immersive training experience. So you got to go out and find those people.
Right.
That's a hard road to hoe. And a lot of guys, you or me, we attend a class, you do the math. I paid X amount of dollars to be here. You look at the group of people and you think, gee, this guy, instructor X, is banking, and you or I get it. But most people think I could do what he just did and I could make all that money, not thinking or realizing all of the nuts and bolts that go into filling that classroom up or that range up. And shit, man, I'll be in Arizona in a couple of days. I'm on the road a couple times a week. I'm sorry, a couple times a month. And that's taxing on the family. I'm not, complaining. I'm usually drinking good beer, eating good meals, hanging out with good people in good places. And I travel with the weather. So I'm going to Arizona this next trip. And, I'm not complaining whatsoever, but it's not all glamour either. I'll drive 2,500 miles in 4 or 5 days to run a gig, and you're churning and burning. Come home, unload, kiss your family, and get back to work. It's not, relaxation time after that. So I think the challenges are the same that exist in any business. It's, for me, you brought it up earlier as well, feeling something owed to you. I see a lot of that. It's very hard to put up with that from guys when they want to complain. That guy John, who the hell is he? He's got a podcast and, he's doing all this stuff on social media. And I see it and say, okay, there's a guy I've got a very simple way I see things. It's cause and effect, or action and reaction. And you plant seeds, you lift weights and eat correctly and go to sleep, you will get bigger muscles. There's no way around that unless you have a disease of some sort. If you put the action behind something, you will get a result. It doesn't mean it'll be a good result, but you will get a result.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, I'm also a believer that, and I've operated this way, I've had better people around me than I am. And I've always been a believer in putting subject matter experts around me. So I always say, you can control 2 things in life. You can control what time you get out of bed and how loyal you are, right? And as I said before, my criteria, whether it's for friendship or life, is simple. As long as you're not fucking with my money or my chick, we're good. For the most part, a lot of other stuff is just kind of ancillary. You can't, it just kind of comes and goes. 9 out of 10 people, when you ask them why they don't like somebody, especially if they only know them from the internet, because one of the first things I ask people all the time, Mickey, is I'll say, well, how do you know them? And they'll say, well, I only seen him on the internet, or I heard this. Right away, it's null and void. Everything you're going to say after is now voided, because what you see on the internet is what I want you to see. Do I think everything that I see of you on the internet is who you are? No, I learn who you are through an hour-long conversation or the half-hour-long conversation we had before, or however, and you get to kind of figure out how somebody ticks, and you can probably pretty much understand what'll fly out of their mouth and what won't, what their capabilities are as a person. And as you said, everybody has done shitty things. Everybody's made a mistake in life or done something. Nobody's perfect. But by and large, when you approach your business or your life or the things that you're doing, you almost have to continue to strive to just put a smile on your face and just kind of yes people. And you just say, hey, man, and I've only had to say this to a handful of friends. Hey, man, my relationships are my relationships. My friendships are my friendships. I don't tell you who to be friends with or cool with. You don't tell me who to be cool with. I'm good. If you don't like someone or you have a vendetta against them or you have a problem, then you figure that out. Or I don't tell people how to run their business unless they contract me or pay me a fee, and I'll give them advice from afar. Or I'll talk to them from afar and I'll say, hey, here's what I see. Let me put something together. But for the most part, you're going to have a lot of people that are shooting from the rough, and they think because they see somebody on the internet, they know them. And in the reality is they don't know them. And they've never met them. They've never sat. So the first thing, if somebody comes up to me and ever says, hey, that Mickey, he's a frickin', that carry trainer, he's a douchebag, I'm going to say, have you ever met him? Have you talked to him? Have you ever sat down? And if the answer is no, which more often than not it is, or have you had an hour-long conversation, I'm going to say, I don't see it, man. I don't see it respectfully. And if it gets brought up a second time, a lot of times I'm just kind of like, whatever, dude, I he's cool with me. It's whatever, we're moving on. And I just can't be bothered. But you're going to see that stigma in any business, as you said earlier. In our business, it's a little more prolific at times, because I think everybody thinks like their opinion matters or should matter. And I call it gatekeepers. You have an industry flooded with gatekeepers, and people want to be the gatekeepers to the industry. He's in, he's out. She's in, she's out. This person's okay, that person isn't. And I just think that's such a fucked up mentality that I can't even begin to wrap my head around it, because I'm like, more power to everybody. If you don't like something, a piece of gear or somebody, by all means, do a video on it, put it out there. I'm not mad at that, but at the same time, qualify your remarks, make sure you understand. It's like when I get into debates over, who's the best baseball player of all time or basketball player, any of these things, who's the best shooting instructor, whatever. If you can back it up with 7, 8, or 10 points, I'll buy whatever you're selling. Okay, right,
Lou Gehrig,
yeah, I could
or
see
Pete Rose,
Ted Williams,
Michael Jordan.
But I could see it as long as you can back it up, as long as you can make your stance known and you can back it up with a few points. I'm more than willing to listen, or always willing to listen. It's the people that operate in absolutes that it causes problems. And I'm sure you've seen that on the range, and you've talked to people like that are like, this is the way you do it, period.
My buddy Matt always says the only absolute is that there are none.
And that's a great way to put it. And I've been on the range with guys with very extensive backgrounds that say my way is the only way. And the minute they do that, I'm like, I really got to sit through another 6 hours of this? I'm like, oh my God. Because I've literally been on the range with instructors, because I run bullets forward on all my mags. I was on the range after maybe 6 or 7 years of training. And a guy with an extensive background takes my AR mag and he flips it around. And I said, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, you have it in wrong. I go, it's an ambidextrous mag holder. He goes, yeah, but you're supposed to really grab it this way. I go, I do bullets forward on everything. I said, it's just what I do. It works for me. And he's like, but you'll go faster this way. I said, in 10 years, I've not really clocked it faster, and I'm not prepared to learn a whole nother way. I like bullets forward. Well, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? I just did. Why do they make ambidextrous mag holders then? It's just like you get into this weird debate with people, and I'm like, I don't beer can reload. That's how I reload. I prefer to condition all my equipment the same. It's just how I am. I mean, am I fired? Am I, you know what I mean? Am I not allowed?
Yeah, right. You give me a refund. That's an interesting thing about, I'm guilty of being judgmental. Like you're saying about reading the book by its cover, so to speak. Actually, I mentioned Super Dave Harrington a moment ago. There's a guy that's kind of polarizing on the internet in this space. And I was with Dave one time, and this guy's name came up, and I go, fuck that guy. He's a prick. And I said something like that. Dave looks at me and goes, you know him, bro? And I go, no, I don't. But, like his da-da-da. And he goes, so you never met him? And I said, no. And he goes, so you never talked to him? And I'm like, no, but I'm trying to get to my point. And he goes, I know the guy. He's a good dude. Shut the fuck up. Yeah. And I looked at him, and I'm like, all right, check, man. Got it. I got it. Roger. And I thought about it, and I talked to him later in private. I said, hey, man, this isn't me like coming like hat in hand. I'm so sorry I said something. I'm like, it's pretty cool that you stuck up for your buddy like that, and it actually, good adult man-to-man talk. Thank you. But then later I thought about it again, and I thought, you know what? This guy is very polarizing, and it's his way of communicating via the internet, and either people love this dude or they don't like him. And I have since talked to him, and he is not the persona he puts out, but that is the persona he wants. And I think sometimes it's not bad. There are people in this space that come off. There's people that think I'm an asshole, and I don't think I'm an asshole, but I just don't suffer fools. I don't have time for bullshit. And I also don't like smoke and mirrors and phallical arguments and people who think that they're going to use their super intelligence to try to talk circles around my dumb hick ass. Like I'm not that stupid, and I'll just say, fuck off. I'm not going to listen to it. So people occasionally, a lot, think I'm an asshole. But could I try to pretend and be like, a different version of me? What you're hearing, this is me. If you see me on videos, that's me. And I don't, love me or like me, or hate me. And so I think it's kind of like, it does go both ways. Like,
of course,
don't judge a book by a cover, but like, if you see my dog that's sitting here right now, her name's Charlie. She's 20 pounds. She's a cockapoo. You wouldn't be scared. You would, think, oh, come here, I want to pet you. But if you saw my buddy's 90-pound pit bull that's got scars all over his face from getting in scraps with other dogs, you saw him, it would be normal for you to say, I'm going to just keep an eye on him and maybe keep a chair between us. You know, like it's sometimes judgments are okay as well. That was all I really was driving at. If you're basing them on experience, but you don't need to be an asshole. You don't need to go out of your way and be like, man, that Bartolo is an asshole and I don't know anything about him, but I just don't like his style and shirts.
I think I'm okay. Like we were talking about a mutual. I'm okay with somebody being like, hey, I just don't dig that dude. Throws a vibe at me. I just don't dig that dude. I'm okay. Like if that's where you want to live and breathe, hey man, more power to you. But I think you're still giving up too much brain power to that other person. Like I'm just kind of like you heard me in reference to the person before we started talking, and I was like, who? Like what? Like okay, like whatever.
There's a lot of people listening to this gonna say, man, these guys have like not referenced, but referenced like 8 people.
No, I mean, listen, I have no problem. My big thing is if someone's not here to defend themselves, I usually don't, I won't get into that.
Yeah. I know. I don't want to do that either.
But I look at it as, honestly, Mickey, like you have what I have in me and what Paul has in him and certain people and even Chad Lyman, you got a little city in you. And when you have a little city in you, you kind of have that little bit of an edge, and you're always going to have it. It's just one of those things that like you don't ever want to apologize for because you don't want to lose it. But at the same time, we all try to do a better job of tempering it. And, I think it's one of those things. It's just a little city in you. That dude's a fucking asshole. And it's not, you don't mean it. It's kind of like you don't mean it in a way that you're trying to put I know what you're saying. It's not, you're not trying to get out of line, but you're just like, they can be an asshole. Like I can be an asshole, just like you said you can. Of course. We all have that in us. One thing I'm guilty of 150%, and I'll admit it on air and own it. I am at times short with people. And that's just a byproduct of me being somebody who my time becomes valuable, and I have like a weird anxiety sometimes around time, and I tend to speed things up, and I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever, man, that's great. Like moving on, like change the topic, and I do it with my best of friends. You could put Tony Sentmanat on here, Real World Tactile. He's one of my best friends. Tony and I talk every day. You could put Suresh Madhaven, 221B, any of my, John Lovell will tell you. Sometimes I'm just like people will be like, lunch. Yeah, let's just get a sandwich over here. No, I want to go here and I want to sit down and do that. No, dude, I don't have the fucking time. Let's just sit here. Like, I'm just like, I can get short with people, but it's just more a byproduct of time. And I just like to focus on the task at hand. Like people all the time will be like, let's get lunch at Chacho. And I'm like, I don't do lunch. I'm like, the money's on the floor. I stay on the floor. I like to walk around. Yeah. I like to see things. I like to get my FaceTime with people. To me, 5 days isn't enough. I need 10. So I tend to be short with people, and people take offense to that, or people can take offense to that. Like I'm brutal in meetings because I'm very quick and I lay it all out and I take my notes and I do my treatments and I'll lay it out to people. And I've been guilty and accused of being short with people 150 times, and I'll lose more deals because of it. But I don't want those types of people to work with either. And that's kind of like, I'm okay with it. There's a very, very large and notable company in the industry that sponsors a lot of shooters. They don't make guns. That's as close as I'm going to get to admitting it. I sat and had like an hour and a half meeting with them. And after, they were just like, you're just too far ahead of the curve and too quick for us to kind of wrap our head around everything. And I'm like, well, then it's not a fit. And I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with that. Let's move on. But they're like, we really want to work with you in some capacity. I'm like, nah, it's not worth it. I'm like, if you don't see it, then I can't sit there and explain it to you. That's why I said I'm not a great instructor. I don't have the patience, and I tend to be short with people. Does that make me a total piece of shit in the universe? No. I think it's just knowing your audience. I think the president has a way about him. I think you have a way about, I think everybody has a way about them. Like when I explain Donald Trump to people, I tell people all the time, you have to understand what he is. He's a New York City taxi cab driver. He's a real estate guy. When he goes into a room and he does what he does, even tweeting, he's working the room. To him, Twitter isn't Twitter. It's the room, and he's working the room. And people don't understand that. They don't have the ability to understand it. They're like, well, he's insulting me. He's not insulting you. He's working the room. I doubt he thinks about you 5 seconds after he sends the tweet out. And that's what a lot of city guys and people do. They work the room. And that's what he's doing. And I'm not the first person to acknowledge that. Actually, Ben Shapiro is. He's working the room. And that's how he approaches his business, and that's what he does. Hate him or love him. Ronald Reagan was an actor. He was an actor.
Yep.
That's why he was so polished when he was up there. Do I think he understood every single thing he was saying? No, he was still a part of the teleprompter generation, but he was acting, and he was an exceptional actor. Do I think he knew everything about foreign policy? No, but he probably had some of the best speechwriters in Hollywood writing his stuff.
Yeah.
So he was phenomenal at it. And I think people, Mickey, have a failure to kind of understand that some people are just wired that way. I think you got a little city in you. That means you got a little bite in you, bite or fight, whatever you want to call it. And some people can handle it.
I like to bite and fight.
You got a little bite. So there's nothing wrong with that. But judging someone based on the fact that they have a little bite, and that's the exact person you referenced before this show, I think we both just got a little bite in us. Am I losing as much sleep over it as maybe he? No, I don't care. I mean, like, whatever. Okay, you don't like me? Okay, cool. Pound rocks and move on. But it's like, there's plenty of real estate in the universe. You sleep on your side of the bed. Okay, great. I'm not like out on a vendetta. I don't have the time for that shit. And if you have the time,
what's troublesome to me, like in this biz or any biz, but I didn't see this in any other business that I've worked in like I do here. And it's because it is a tight-knit community. People, when I say from the outside, I mean like the folks that are going to the gun store, purchasing gear, consuming this content, that are not working directly for a manufacturer, are manufacturing, or are somehow tied like you or I are into this firearm industry. It's tight knit, man. I had recently a student got hired, a former student got hired by a company in this business, and didn't work out. I had nothing to do with it, but like such a small world that this guy that I know on one coast gets hired by somebody on the other coast, and I'm just kind of like caught in the middle. Or I'll have guys. I just was on the phone with somebody earlier that I had never met him, but between the two of us, probably there's 100 people we both know together and have worked with and done things with. And you have to be very careful, not just from a self-preservation standpoint, but it's bad for business, and it's just bad. It's bad behavior when you go about bashing people, or, like I said earlier, being dishonorable and living in a dishonorable fashion. That story I mentioned, that dude's going around talking some smack about story I mentioned, except he forgets the people he's talking to I knew and other people knew before he met them, and he's, saying this silly little story to try to cover his tracks. And they're like, yeah, but wait a second, this guy who you're talking about, I've known for 15 years, and I don't think that that's the case. And it's like, it's such a tight-knit community. You can't, it's not like, which I think is probably any business, Hollywood or anything. There's only so many players and so many moving pieces. You can't
burn every bridge.
You can't burn any bridges. I think the problem is, though, when you do it for the wrong reasons, when you exploit honorable behavior only because it suits you, then it is not actually honorable behavior. It's contrived, and you are Eddie Haskell. If you're going to live in an honorable and upright fashion, and I'm not talking about being pious or holy, but treat people like you want to be treated, show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, don't be a lying, cheating, thieving son of a bitch, be honorable. If you're only doing that because you think it's going to help you, then you're really not honorable at all. You're just self-motivated. It's just too small of a community to not behave properly.
No, you're 100% right. And you only get one, and this is going to sound corny, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I think by and large, there's a lot of, I guess the term's pikers, people that will just come and go, and that happens. That's just a byproduct of the business. But the reality is, I wish pikers. I wish that everybody had to do jujitsu for a little while, because then they would learn a degree of humility. And I know you know what I'm talking about, because you only learn these things when you're down in the mud, and that's a term I like to use. You have to have your face pushed down in the mud at some point, and you'll learn a degree of humility. And I am very thankful and grateful for so many of my opportunities, but I try to explain to people 2 to 3 times a week I get a dose of humble pie when I go down to the mats. I go down to the mats, I train for a few hours with some friends, and I'm in Vegas, bro, and I don't need to tell you what that means. I'm at 10th Planet in Vegas. I walk on that mat. Some nights it's Ben Saunders, some nights it's this one, some nights it's that one, and you can catch a beating real quick. And you're going to go home and you're going to be real humble. And the problem is there's a lot of guys, and I know you go through this because you train, and there's a lot of guys that they'll run their mouth, they'll talk, they'll do this, they'll do that. And you just kind of sit back and you just got to take it all in, Mickey. You just got to kind of be like, there are moments where I just smile, I just look up and like, Tony's had to say it 150 times regarding me. And I know John, like, I'm not here, I'm just trying to do me in a corner over here. And I think that's what a lot of people just need to do. Just do you and do your business. Now, we're in a troubling time, and I try to explain to people, like, even with what's just happened recently, you got Joe Biden naming Beto O'Rourke his anti-gun confiscation czar. And this industry needs to come together at some point. We have problems with the NRA. We have problems with all these different entities. This industry needs to come together. It needs to galvanize, and it needs to do it fast. And everybody needs to put their petty bullshit aside and their internal squabbling, because that's how the other side wins, right? And I took a lot of heat for trying to meld fitness, trying to meld MMA into shooting. And one of the things I told somebody, because I've had somebody come up to me one time, and you brought up the podcast, and they said, what are you trying to do, with this podcast and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, do you understand what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to do for the gun industry what Joe did for MMA. I'm trying to take this thing mainstream. It needs to be. We need to get a higher voice. We need to get a bigger platform. We need to put a voice behind a lot of the great people out there, like yourself and like so many other instructors and folks out there that are teaching and training and going about it the right way and working with great folks like Paul Sharp and working with fantastic people. And we need to put a voice behind them. And if we don't do that, we're going to die. We're going to fail. Because if we don't do it now, we can't count on the NRA doing it. They're not walking through the door anytime. We can't count on it. We can't count on Turning Point USA doing it. It has to come from us. And if we don't all get together now and put everything aside and say, how do we progress the narrative forward? And how do we, fix this? And how do we get national reciprocity? And how do we not get people like Beto O'Rourke elected that want to send, militias to our door to seize the guns and everything else? How do we stop that? And we have to come together. It has to happen.
I don't disagree. I will say, having spent over a decade in politics, I was the vice chairman of a political party in charge of raising funds and helping run elections. You mentioned Turning Point USA. I met Charlie Kirk when he was in high school, and he was just forming that organization. He was a kid. People were bringing him around to meet folks at breakfasts and fundraising events for folks. And he stayed the course. He's out there doing the good work every day. So that there is something like where people look at an organization like that and they say, yeah, they're not going to save us. But that was just a kid with an idea that spent a decade of his life going at it. So and this isn't any contradiction to what you're saying, but it's Charlie's doing the same thing you're talking about. Well, hey, my buddies in high school and colleges don't give a shit. I need to go help them give a shit. You're doing the same thing. I believe that's what I'm doing too. I always tell people I'm not a firearms instructor. I'm if anything, I want to remind people that we're Americans and you can do whatever the fuck you want to do as long as you're not treading upon the rights of others. And that could be being the best dad, the best business owner, the best garbage man, the best surgeon, the best mom, podcaster, whatever. But like that. So I'm agreeing with you. Your thought process there, I think, is spot on. And it might not be the NRA or Charlie Kirk, but you hit 500 or 500,000 or 5 million people, and I'll hit my 500 or 5 million. And now we're going somewhere. And there's, people like you and me get people saying, well, who the fuck does that guy think he is? And I can't take, if I respond to those kinds of people or feel that I need to respond to them, I'm no longer on task. Right. So
you can't.
I'm sure.
Now, we brought that whole situation up with the gun confiscation. Where do you see that going with Biden and O'Rourke, and why do you think he came out with that right now?
Man, it's an interesting time right now. I like you, travel a lot. I talk to people in a lot of places, and when I'm traveling or doing business, I talk a lot of politics. I spend a lot of time in that area, and that's when you first asked me how I got into this business. My editor and I met while running a campaign. He was a political strategist, and so we kind of came together to do this thing. But it's the thing I think that Americans need to remember while we pound our chest and talk about the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is an amendment, which meant it was added to the Constitution. People forget that. They maybe didn't have basic civics in their grade school or high school, but there are, in fact, many Americans that don't feel like your listeners and like you and I do about firearms and about the Bill of Rights. And they have the right to hate guns. They have a right to want to abolish guns. It is their right as an American to want to do that. And I think we've been going at it wrong, where instead of fighting the people that hate it, we need to fight why they hate it. And there's that, this is a societal problem, a cultural problem. But when we've got dudes showing up to state capitals, we've in Illinois here have run one of the largest Second Amendment gatherings for decades. What went on in Virginia was the only thing ever to surpass what we've done here in our state capital of Springfield. We've had upwards of 10,000 people annually at our capital for an event called iGold, Illinois Gun Owner Lobby Day. And when you have people show up to these events dressed like in mismatched camouflage, and this has nothing to do with, I'm not knocking somebody because they got mismatched camouflage.
No,
and they got a bunch of Amazon purchased gear on them that looks like some goofy ass 80s movie for like Commando or something on the steps of the Capitol. I get that it's your right. I get that it is your that in a way you are kind of thumbing your nose to lawmakers that are trying to strip you of your rights. I get all that. I'm the guy that wants to say fuck you and wave my fingers in the air as well. That is what gets on the news. That's the message that gets to the people that you are fighting against, not the sane arguments, not the logical and well worded and well phrased discussions. It's some fucking dude standing there with an SKS rifle slung around his belly, with a pocket full of donuts. And anybody listening doesn't understand that I'm making a point, not that it may be their right to do it, but that's not the way that the argument should be phrased. So we've not done a good job. And so now we've got guys like Biden and these dudes that are not doing it on their own accord. They're put up to it, not by some pie in the sky or man in a ivory tower figure, hooded figure in some dark room. It's by the masses that have the same thought processes. Right. I think people forget that. Obama didn't win because there wasn't enough conservatives that went out and voted. Obama won because enough supporters of his went out and voted and got other people to vote. Or the reason Trump won, it wasn't because enough people on the other side didn't vote. It was because enough people supported him and his campaign and got the vote out. And that's the simple thing, like you and I just talking about some business 101 stuff. John Lovell hasn't exploded because John's got the sweetest, neatest trim beard or the greatest shooting skills. I know 1,000 guys that can outshoot John Lovell. If you hear me, John, I'm probably one of them. Okay, John Lovell, I don't care. That was a joke, but it's because he's crafted a good program. He's put it in front of people in a way that they can understand it, and he's a likable guy. You know, there's guys that are some of them that are some of the best shooters in the world, but couldn't sell a class to fill their life or to save their life because nobody knows who the hell they are. So I guess the long and the short of it, you asked a question about what's going on with Biden and Beto. People want it, man. And they want it because the narrative that is being spun, and this goes back to my responsibility argument, well, it's the news's fault. No, people choose to listen to what they want to listen to, and you have to be a voice that's not louder, but almost in some ways more soothing. What do you want to listen to? Somebody screaming at you or somebody singing to you? Do you want to listen to somebody that's fucking yelling and swearing, or somebody that's telling you that you're beautiful and they love you? And that might sound corny, but you watch any march for anything, pro-life, pro-choice, pro-gun, anti-gun, you will see people in the streets in just rage screaming at each other because they don't know any other way to get their point across. Fuck you. You don't represent me. I hate you because why you're standing here with that crayon-written sign goes against what I believe, so I hate you, and by the way, your hair is stupid. You know, then you got to throw a little of that in there, and that's what it gets to, man. So then we reach for these puppets, but people think that they're puppets with some rich guy's hand up their ass. There are puppets. We, the people, shove our hand up these people's asses and say, Trump's my puppet. And we collectively are going to put him on the puppet stage and let him be our figure. Or we're going to put Beto up there or Bernie or whoever. We choose this is, if I ever teach a civics class, this is what it'll be called. You choose whose ass to shove your hand up. I just came up with that.
I like it. I don't
know if that answered your question.
No, it totally does. I mean, Mickey, you're absolutely right. It's how you phrase things. Why has jiu-jitsu risen in such prominence in the law enforcement circles? It's risen in prominence mainly because you have this situation where people don't want to do Krav Maga to somebody's face on a body cam. People don't want to throw strikes on a body cam. It doesn't look good. It's very hard to articulate. Well, I punched the guy in the face and I knocked his teeth out. Well, is that, controlling a subject? No. So it's all in how you phrase the narrative. And I felt for a long time, and I continue to feel, one of the reasons I started this, and it's a bit of a mission of mine, was because I felt we were not, as an industry, doing a great job putting a voice behind the gun. And one of the failures that has gone on over and over and over again, and I know you'll agree with this because you've seen it too, and we don't have to get into the gun bunnies and everything else, is posting a picture and just saying, hey, here's me with my gun. Hey, look at me. Boom, and let me, that's not supporting the gun industry. Sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's not helping
the marketing. But the marketing guy that is okay with that understands erroneously that it will get views, but that guy doesn't understand that views do not always equate to sales, but he does it anyway because he knows that the general public thinks views mean sales. Thus, that marketing guy is happy to put on what appears to be success to the public.
And I've lost more jobs than I've kept because I've stuck to my guns on this. So,
no pun intended.
Yeah, no, literally. I've stuck to my guns on this. And I've said to companies, if you want to go do mag dumps in a desert in a bikini, go for it. I'm out. Thanks. Bye. If you want to go, if you want to go back to doing that, I'll gladly go on my own. But I believe in the mission, and I believe in what this platform can do, and I believe in putting. There's more to the industry than that. But if that's, I
think that also begs the question: is the companies that involved, is it their responsibility, their duty, if you would, to protect this space? Does a baker, is it like many industries, the agriculture industry, the dairy industry, the beef industry, the steel industry, right? They have lobbyists. They have The educators do this, teachers unions, firemen's unions. They protect their space. Is it the duty of XYZ ammo company or gun company or sight company or optic company to control messaging? You know, in a way, and as we go down this rabbit hole, and this is something I talk about with young guys all the time that want to flout conspiracy theories to me, what we're talking about is a conspiracy. We are conspiring together to control the message to thousands and millions of people to push an agenda that is not only in an essence, but it is unequivocally what a conspiracy is. And so, like, is that what we want to do? Are we willing to go down that road? And if so, you know, understand that that's how it works. I'm okay with it.
I don't think it's a great question. I don't think it's the responsibility of the companies per se. But I also believe the companies do have a responsibility, just like anything else. Just like if it was Coca-Cola, right? If it was Coca-Cola and they were running ads, at the end of the day, I would hope that there's some oversight and some responsibility that if they were putting gasoline into the Coke that we're drinking.
Those were the days, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. If they were putting gasoline, they would at least put a label on it, you know. And I think there was a lot of in the beginning of stuff going on that really wasn't phrased or framed properly. I think a lot of that's kind of slowly cleaning up. I think the industry has a way of cleaning itself up and self-policing, but I also think that there was a lot that had been gotten away with, and I think that there's still a lot that goes on. But I mean, we can get into companies' responsibility to the masses all day long because there's so much that companies put out that you're just like, what the hell? You know, I've always said this, and this is like one of the things with the gun industry. You know, there's a little bit of a failure in the gun industry for who wants to be responsible. When you get a permit, your permit, you take a class with somebody, they're either a civilian or former law enforcement, you get a certificate, and then you go and you apply to the chief. The chief approves you, and then you get a permit from the state. Who wants the responsibility? Nobody. So there's the same problem. That's why national reciprocity needs to come in, because then you can have reciprocity across state. You have a driver's license in Massachusetts, you could drive a car anywhere. And that's part of the reason why there needs to be some responsibility across the board. And there needs to be some, you know, whether in the NRA was in many ways supposed to be that body. It kind of along the way failed us a little bit. So, you know, I think that, you know, and there's a number of reasons for that. But I think that there has to be some responsibility across the board to say, we're not going to be a part of that. You know, I sit with endless amounts of companies, and I told you, and I mean it, and I'm at a point in my career where I'll lose more jobs than I'll keep because, you know, at the end of the day, you have to maintain a certain amount of, do you want to go do this? Because if you want to do that, which is mag dumps in a desert in a bikini, go do it.
Sounds awesome.
You know, yeah. I mean, have fun. Is that going to help move the needle for you? Are you building a community or are you building likes? What do you want? You know, and you'll sit with them and they'll agree with you to your face. And then what often happens, Mickey, you've seen it 100 times. You know, that's why I love like what guys like Dan at Vertex, certain people do. You have to build it right. And you have to stick to your guns and you got to build it right. And you have to be willing to build it right. And you have to bring the right people in that have the right messaging and that are trying to teach and do things properly and move the needle forward. And if you're not going to do that, then get the fuck out of the way.
Dan's a good dude.
Absolutely. We could go on and on. We're an hour and 15 minutes in, you and I. This is epic.
Oh,
we could go on and on. It is epic. I've had a lot of fun talking to you. We share so many common relationships, and actually we share a similar lineage. I started in an SBG. You know, I mean, we have so much. We haven't even scratched jiu-jitsu. We could spend 9 hours on that. How long you been training in jiu-jitsu, by the way?
I am a 20-year white belt.
Get out of here. Really?
20-year white belt. Yep. I love it.
Paul hasn't bumped you yet? He owes you a stripe at least.
I've been injured so many times. I've got 88 titanium staples in my guts from a bad day in like 2001, maybe 2000, somewhere around there. I mean, to me, it's a labor of self mastery. I don't train with firearms for trophies or medals. I train because there's a singular goal. I don't train in jiu-jitsu or boxing that we do or Muay Thai for a belt. That doesn't mean that I have earned some belt that I don't have. I just don't care. So I go in fits and starts. I'll go like 6 months heavy and hot, and then something happens. I've been nursing a bum shoulder. And at the end of the day, the part of my physicality that pays the bills has to be intact. So playtime, which I don't mean it in a negative way, but the part that's not, I don't get paid to go roll on the mats. I get paid to go train. So if I tear my shoulder up and I can't hold a gun or can't train, that's a problem. So I just finally got back to it actually in the last couple months after a long 6-month repair of a shoulder. And I went back to college for a little while, and that took up a ton of free time. I redid the EMT program that I did 20 years ago, and really found out all of a sudden, man, this is like taking up 20, 30 hours a week of free time. Going to the hospital, going to the community college, going and studying and stuff. So you've got to give and take somewhere. I'm fortunate. One of the gentlemen I work with is one of the founding members of the Army Combatives Program, a guy named Aaron Cooper. Aaron lives in my town, and he comes and helps with some of our events, like our S12 event. And he and I got a little private deal in my basement. We got a mat and a boxing timer, and we go to town. So till one of us ends up with something broken. But to your point, I've been doing it a little while.
I appreciate you taking the time, and I admire the hell out of you from afar. Believe me, I love what you're doing, and I actually, fuck anyone that says you got a bad attitude. I like it.
Who said that I had a bad attitude? Now you're hearing it too.
Listen, Mickey, I can neither confirm nor deny that I've heard those things. But no,
I guarantee you've heard it, and that's okay.
No. I love it, but I appreciate you taking the time, and my platform's always your platform, and I really appreciate you, taking an hour and frickin' 20 minutes now to shoot the breeze. I mean, I could do this again. You're one of the few people I say this to anytime, anytime you want to do it or anytime you want to get on here. Shit, I offered Diana Mueller the same thing. She's been on here 3 times. So, anytime you want to do it, let's throw the mic on, and I would love to rap with you. Let everybody know where they can find you and where everyone can reach out to you and where your classes will be and what you're up to the next couple of weeks.
Cool, man. I'll just, again, thank you. And I was happy to be asked, and anytime that you want me on here, you let me know, and I'll definitely spend some time chewing the fat with you if we can make it happen. So Kerry Trainer is how to find us on Instagram, on YouTube. KerryTrainer.com is the web page. And that's where all of our classes are listed. That's where you sign up for classes. That's how you can email us for information on hosting or on any type of specialized training, etc. So just punch Kerry Trainer into the search bar of whatever.
Yeah, I'll put the link down below for you.
Cool, man. Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I love everything you're doing, man. How are you with DMs? Do you answer them, or is that a bad place to reach you?
Oh, no. Yeah, I mean, that's being in business, for years, I hear guys complain. They're like, I don't ever check my DMs. I go, where the fuck are you even on the internet then? Like, I mean, there is a fine line, and you're a good guy to ask this to. Like, my wife and I sometimes will have guys that I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way, but they take our accessibility as meaning like we're best friends. So then it goes from answering questions to like, everyday chit chat. And you have to draw the line somewhere, because you can't have 100 people trying to have conversations with you all day, every day. You know what I mean?
Mickey, I've had to do it with friends. I've had to be like, listen, now this is like you're entering into like a consulting agreement now. You know, like, come on. So, I've had to do it with friends. And, I'm at the point with a lot of people where I'm like, I don't mind giving you the introductions or helping you out, but I'm like, we need to pump the brakes here. So, no, I've had
Is that what you tell them?
Yeah. Absolutely. As
You
far
just
as
say, hey, we got to pump the brakes here. I'm a busy guy, and you're cramping my style.
I think at the end of the day, it's about creating boundaries. It's like it's easy to be an actor, right? But if you want to be a paid actor, that's not easy, correct? So
Sure.
So you have to make a decision. Do you want to be a paid actor? So I think when people make the decision that they're not gonna act for free, because anybody can wander onto a set and be like, hey, I want to be a stand-in, or I want to be this, or I want to be that. But if you want to get paid, that's a whole different story. You got to go to acting class, everything else. I've been around this business a long time, and I've been done and started and helped start a lot of different companies and been involved and had my hand in a lot of things. I'm at the point now where some of the advice I give away, I see companies implement, and I'm like, you motherfucker. Dawn,
Send me a check.
And listen, I can't take credit for saying this. Dom Rosso said this to me once. You know what Dom said? Dom said, I've given away more $1 million ideas than I've kept. And that's the truth. We do that. We give away
I've
our
heard
IP.
that from other people as well. But that's a good way to be, because not from a selfish standpoint, you're in demand when you are not, when you are generous with your time and resources and knowledge.
So what I tell everybody when it comes to customer service, yeah, you have to acknowledge it. But I always say the best thing to do, and maybe a habit for you guys to get into, if somebody messages you, you obviously want to answer them from a customer service standpoint. But I think it's important to delineate the two fronts. You say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you've reached my media department. If you would like to send us any questions, please head over to our website and use the contact us form, and get them to send an email and explain to them, put everything you want answered in the email. And maybe it's a gear question, maybe it's something else. And then you answer it instead of getting into this back and forth dialogue where on DM, where the conversation goes down a rabbit hole. And now all of a sudden, the guy's following you into Starbucks.
Right.
So
good point.
Yeah, you create a little bit of separation of church and state there. Like, you've reached this our media department. Thank you for coming here, and we appreciate you. But at the same time, this isn't where we do back and forth banter. My friends have my phone number. It's not to say you can't become my friend over a DM. I mean, the way I do it, and this is more for the advanced scouts out there. If somebody and I share a lot of mutual friends, I consider you an acquaintance, even if it is social media, e-meeting you, put it that way. I'll take the call. I'll be like, yeah, give me a buzz here. You know what I mean? If I don't know you from Adam and you reach out just because you have a big following, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be like, woohoo, let's party, because I wouldn't expect that on the other end. But at the same time, if we share 10 friends, I'm like, all right, he's in the circle. Hey, what's up? Give me a shout. You need something? Give me a call. I don't have a problem with that. Usually I'll just give people my number. I don't put a lot in messaging anymore. I'm like, here's my number. Call me. I'd rather a phone call. I can block you there. Easy. That's easy. You get one phone line. I'm not saying you get the second, but and that's kind of how I operate a little bit. But I think you have to keep a little bit of separation of church and state, media from customer. If somebody chimes in, I think, and hits you up and has a question about a course, you refer them to your web page. If it's not something you can't answer quick, refer anything else, please put it in an email, head over to my email, and we'll answer you in a timely fashion. Thanks for playing.
That's kind of what I do. Although I have found I've long ago subscribed to the idea, if I can touch it less, that's what I want to do. So I'm already touching it. So I don't want to touch it 2 or 3 extra times. If I'm communicating to you right now and I can put it to bed, I'm going to do that. But if I can see if it's going into a rabbit hole or some circle jerk episode, then okay.
If they're following you into Starbucks,
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why I actually do display from time to time that I am always armed and have a pretty rapido draw stroke and can shoot people in the head from across rooms.
Well, I don't want any part of that. Okay,
You don't. You don't.
I don't want anything to do with what you're throwing out there because I'm fat and Italian and slow, and I don't want anything to do with that. So
of course, to your listeners, I'm joking, but
no.
I know. I'm just saying it is. There's a fine line though where it gets to be too much. But anybody that wants to get a hold of me, we tell anybody if you've got a question, shoot us a message. You know, if I can't answer it, the easiest thing, like you said, is I'll say, hey man, shoot us an email to training@carrytrainer.com, and we'll try to get you steered in the right direction. So.
Well, Mickey, I love you for taking the time, and we're over here cackling like a couple of hens. You've been hands down one of the longest and best episodes. I appreciate you taking the time, brother.
I'm going to go back and listen through yours and see how many times you've said that to other people.
Go ahead. I dare you. It'll only increase the downloads. Go for it. But no, sincerely, we got to get together. So thank you very much. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank every mutual sponsor we have out there. I know we've both worked with a lot of different the same brands, but I can't thank all the companies enough for supporting guys like Carry Trainer, and Mickey's a great guy and supporting me. So we appreciate everybody, and we're going to sign out.
Thank you, brother.